Hey everybody, Mr. Mike here, getting ready for summer, drinking some Dunkin'. Want to talk to you guys just for a minute about behavior. As you guys learned this morning, kind of our big thing is being kind, being respectful, being responsible, and being safe. These are the talking points in addressing all behavior, okay? Are you being kind? Are you being respectful the way you're talking right now? Asking questions, getting their brains thinking about their own behavior, and even the impact of that behavior. I also want to throw in there, at all locations, we really need to be consistent with procedures, lining up, going outside, getting lunches, going into the van, getting out of the van. A lot of behavioral issues can be quelled by having consistent procedures that the kids know, understand, and can follow. As well, however we handle the campers, that are having a behavioral issue, it's my expectation that we are responding to them, in the same tone and in a respectful manner that, we expect of them. We need to model that. But the real question, the big challenge is, what do you do when you have a series of things happening? A consistent problem with a kid, has constant conflicts with other campers. Camper may not share very well with others. Sometimes just talking to them doesn't stop the behavior. And so then what do we do? I wanted to share with you the story of Timothy. It's a true story, took place in 1965. In fact, he just passed away last year at the age of 68. And it's an absolutely true story. Dr. Neil Dreyer will give you a little bit more. Follow along.
And I'd like to read this to you, if I can do it without tearing up. And this story illustrates this as well as anything I've ever seen. There's a story many years ago of an elementary school teacher. Her name was Mrs. Thompson. As she stood in front of her 5th grade class on the very first day of school, she told the children a lie. Like most teachers, she looked at her students and said that she loved them all the same. But that was impossible because there in the front row, slumped in his seat, was a little boy named Teddy Stoddard. Mrs. Thompson had watched Teddy the year before and noticed that he didn't play well with the other children, that his clothes were messy, and that he constantly needed a bath. Teddy could be unpleasant. It got to the point where Mrs. Thompson would actually take delight in marking his papers with a broad red pen and making bold X's and then putting a big F at the top of his papers. At the school where Mrs. Thompson taught, she was required to review each child's past records, and she put Teddy's off until last. However, when she reviewed his file, she was in for a surprise. Teddy's 1st grade teacher wrote, "Teddy is a bright child with a ready laugh. He does his work neatly and he has good manners. He's a joy to be around." His 2nd grade teacher wrote, "Teddy's an excellent student, well liked by his classmates, but he's troubled because his mother has a terminal illness and life at home must be a struggle." His 3rd grade teacher wrote, "His mother's death has been hard on him. He tries to do his best, but his father doesn't show much interest, and his home life will soon affect him if steps aren't taken." Teddy's 4th grade teacher wrote, "Teddy's withdrawn and doesn't show up much interest in school. He doesn't have many friends, and sometimes he even sleeps in class." By now, Mrs. Thompson realized the problem, and she was ashamed of herself. She felt even worse when her students brought her Christmas presents wrapped in beautiful ribbons and bright paper, except for Teddy's. His present was clumsily wrapped in heavy brown paper that he got from the grocery bag. Mrs. Thompson took pains to open it in the middle of the other presents. Some of the children started to laugh when she found a rhinestone bracelet with some of the stones missing and a bottle that was 1/4 full of perfume. But she stifled her children's laughter when she exclaimed how pretty the bracelet was, putting it on and dabbing some of the perfume on her wrist. Teddy Stoddard stayed after school that day just long enough to say, "Mrs. Thompson, today you smell just like my mom used to." After the children left, she cried for at least an hour. On the very day she quit teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic, and instead, she began to teach children. Mrs. Thompson paid particular attention to Teddy. As she worked with him and his mind seemed to come alive, the more she encouraged him, the faster he responded. By the end of the year, Teddy had become one of the smartest children in the class, and despite her lie, became one of her teacher's pets. A year later, she found a note under the door from Teddy telling her that she was still the best teacher he ever had in his whole life. 6 years went by before she got another note from Teddy. He then wrote that he had finished high school third in his class, and she was still the best teacher he ever had in his whole life. 4 years after that, she got another letter saying that while things had been tough at times, he stayed in school and stuck with it and would soon graduate from college with the highest of honors. He assured Mrs. Thompson that she was still the very best and favorite teacher he ever had in his whole life. Then 4 more years passed, and yet another letter came. This time he explained that after he got his bachelor's degree, he decided to go a little further. The letter explained that she was still the best and favorite teacher he ever had, but now his name was a little longer. The letter was signed Theodore F. Stoddard, M.D. But the story doesn't end there. You see, there was yet another letter that spring. Teddy said he'd met this girl and was going to be married. He explained that his father had died a couple of years ago, and he was wondering if Mrs. Thompson might agree to sit in the place at the wedding that was usually reserved for the mother of the groom. Of course, Mrs. Thompson did, and guess what? She wore that bracelet, the one with the several rhinestones missing. And she made sure she was wearing the perfume that Teddy remembered his mother wearing on their last Christmas together. They hugged each other, and Dr. Stoddard whispered in Mrs. Thompson's ear, "Thank you so much for making me feel important and showing me that I could make a difference." Mrs. Thompson came with tears in her eyes and whispered back, "Teddy, you have it all wrong. You were the one who taught me that I could make a difference. I didn't know how to teach until I met you." Isn't that a beautiful story? Yeah.
I can't speak for every educator, but I got an education to change kids' lives. And I used to think that was teaching them. It was teaching them the curriculum and the standards and math and reading. If we can do that, we can change kids' lives. But what I think this story highlights is the kids that you can impact the most, that you can truly make a difference with, are the ones that are the most challenging. You know, they have issues. There's a root to why they do certain things, or the issues that you're seeing are more of a symptom. And so what can we do to help them, to create a positive environment for them? Because sometimes just talking to them every time they do something wrong, or just calling their parents, sending a message to them, doesn't make a difference. And so what I'd like for us to do is to look at the folder. There's 3 scenarios, true scenarios. And I want us to use, this is the pre-referral intervention manual, and it's used by special educators. And basically, before a referral to the office, it gives you ideas on what you can implement in a classroom to help mitigate behavioral issues. I have an abridged version stapled in the folder for you to look at with a table of contents, and I highlighted a few ideas from each topic. You can also use the actual reference to look up more. Some of them have up to 200 ideas. It's a lot. So the abridged, start with that, and then if you don't have any good ideas, you can move from there. And I want you guys to go through each one, talk about different ideas on what can be done to try to help the behavior in the classroom or on the field trip.